What is consciousness? And what does it mean to truly live life awake? Welcome to Clarity to Consciousness, a podcast where we transcend beyond stereotypes, embracing a deeper understanding. I'm your host, Kristen Griffiths, a fellow seeker on this path. Join me on a journey as we dive into conversations with experts, unraveling stigmas, and expanding our awareness to something profound. This is your invitation to open your mind with me as together we bring clarity to the fascinating complexities of human consciousness. Welcome back to Clarity to Consciousness, where we seek to bring clarity to the complexities of human consciousness. Today, I am so thrilled to welcome an Emmy and Grammy-nominated writer, producer, and director to the podcast. He has worked with some of the biggest names in the industry, like Adam Sandler, Dustin Hoffman, Steve Buscemi, crafting compelling narratives that resonate with audiences worldwide. From one of my favorites, Leo, which I watched with my son, which is one of Netflix's #1 movies in 2023, to Sandy Wexler, to The Cobbler, his work spans across humor, drama, and deep human themes. But beyond Hollywood success, he's also a teacher, a mentor, and a believer in the transformative power of storytelling. I am so thrilled to welcome Paul Sado to the podcast. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. And I'm such a fan of yours,
Oh,
so it's
you are?
it's doubly exciting for me to be here. Absolutely.
Oh, well, that is the first I've heard a guest say that. So that is
I'm a
really,
fan, man.
really nice to
Yeah,
hear. Thank you. I'm flattered and
absolutely.
blushing. Paul and I are in the same wavelength because we are both wearing almost the same outfit,
We are. Yeah.
which is really
This is
funny.
the uniform of the conscious storyteller.
It is blue
Hmm.
to amplify our throat chakras.
That's right.
Anyway, we were introduced by Todd Strauss-Shelson, which is a mutual friend of
Absolutely.
ours now.
Hmm.
And I'm so, so grateful that we have met, because I think when I met you, I was instantly drawn to you just because I could feel like you are a really conscious person in the work that you do. And I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit better. Can you start by telling your story and what drew you to storytelling?
It's interesting. I feel like I was kind of a born storyteller. In the sense that I was kind of always spinning yarns as a kid, whereas some kids would see something that would happen at the bus stop. They would go home and maybe just go about the rest of their day. Whereas by the time I got home, I not only had the story of what I did see, but I also had additions that I would have made up. And I was very effusive as a kid and very excited to tell stories. Then, as I got older and I realized that that was an actual job you could have, I became very interested in movies and film and books, obviously, and then life. I think that I learned from a very young age that life is sort of the fodder for storytelling, which then kind of led me to this idea that storytelling is really a sort of apparatus to breed empathy. So the more that I began to care about humanity, the more I wanted to tell stories that exemplified that, that could bring you into those spaces and show you maybe a side of life that you weren't aware of or something about yourself that maybe you weren't looking at or having compassion for.
I love that so much. Yeah, I mean, and stories are such a great teacher, so we can share our own experiences through our own stories with others so that people don't have to go through those experiences themselves and they can
Exactly.
learn
Yeah.
something. Any personal stories of your own that were particularly transformative for you?
Yeah, I mean, I barely got out of high school and I'm in recovery. I'm a sober person, but that wasn't always the case. So as a young person, I sort of left home a little earlier than most would, and I kind of started to hitchhike across country. I wanted to be the Jack Kerouac model of the sort of bohemian adventurer in the world. So I kind of followed that, maybe down certain roads that I didn't realize were dangerous. And I think, in a lot of ways, God protects the dopey, because I was certainly in danger a lot of the time and didn't know it. But I became homeless in New York and in San Francisco and Oregon, traveling around in those spaces, and ultimately kind of had to kind of fight my way back into the world, into society, where I was surprisingly welcomed back, and I was able to become an actor and really begin to use a lot of what I had learned out there in the elements to sort of build myself into a storyteller. So from acting, I was then able to get on sets and learn all the different jobs and how stories operate, how film operates, what a screenplay is, etc. And started really engaging in professional life.
Well, and I was just gonna ask you if for the benefit of everybody listening, I mean, I don't think it's any small feat, the fact that you brought yourself out of homelessness to where you are today. Do you have anything that helped you along the way that you could share with others?
Sure, yeah, I think ultimately what it came down to was believing believing that there was a world where I could be of service, where I could be of use. I think when I was younger, was there was a lot of trauma in my life that I think had led to a place where I didn't really trust the world, and I didn't trust that I had a place in it. So ultimately, I had to come to a decision to have the courage to take the risk to step into uh, society, to step into community and trust that I would be welcomed, and that there was that there was love, and that there was an audience, and that there was a place for me. um, and for a while I had a lot of resentment toward that, because I didn't quite understand why I had to go through some of the things I went through. But what I then realized was I was actually out there fishing. I was fishing for the information. I was fishing for the creativity that I was then going to be able to bring to my work, so that I could stand on solid ground and say, well, this is something I know about. I've seen these things, I've experienced these things. So with a little bit of skill stirred into the pot, and some professional experience, I could actually tell relevant stories that resonate based on the things I've seen personally.
Wow. Wow. That's really powerful. So you look at it now as a gift, I assume.
I look at everything as a gift now. I mean, I walk around with a lot of gratitude. I mean, I have my days, but I think what I do for a living is very rare. I definitely am breathing rare air, and especially since it took me so long to get to the place where I actually am able to pay rent and bills based on my imagination and my drive, et cetera. I do feel like I've been given a great gift, and it's all a blessing.
I love that so much. When you think about the term conscious storytelling,
Mhm.
what comes to mind for you and what feels really good when you're trying to tell a story authentically?
I think the word conscious, we're really saying awareness, right? Awareness with intention.
Hmm.
So I think that that means telling a story from a place of intention, of what do I want? What am I trying to do here? What am I trying to build? So, like I said earlier, and excuse me for repeating myself, which I'm sure I will do again, is empathy for me is the goal. So allowing people to come together and feel something collectively that maybe they wouldn't have felt before or seen before, which I think takes place in all genres. I think that happens in Die Hard. I think that happens hopefully in The Cobbler. It's not limited to a small art movie or a kids movie. I think novels, memoir, podcasts, I think when you're deciding that you want to do something with a certain awareness, with a certain consciousness. It's almost a spiritual work. You're talking about connection, and you're talking about building a bridge, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah. And why do you think for you it came through movies and entertainment versus writing a book?
That was always my like love language, I think, with my father. Like
Mhm.
he was very uh that's what he was able to give to me, was this love of books and movies and you know um uh music, and that is how we communicated. So I think that really got into my blood. I remember seeing Martin Scorsese's The Last Waltz very, very early on, which there was a jump cut in it, and in the in experiencing the jump cut, I realized that, oh, a person makes a movie. A person had to decide to actually snip the negative there and reattach it. So that became very important to me. The movie The 400 Blows, the movie A Clockwork Orange, these are movies that my dad showed me very young. So yeah, I think that became my love language like really early. I also think he like messed me up
Yeah,
and
I was gonna say A
turned
Clockwork
me
Orange,
into,
really young.
yeah, he turned me into a very creative, individual, possibly a little left of center. I wouldn't recommend that you show that movie necessarily to your young kids, but did something for me.
Well, that's what I loved about Leo is that,
Thank you.
and you can show that one to
You can
young
show it to your
kids.
kids. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it really brings the heart. You learn a lesson. It's fun to watch, but also there's a deeper meaning to it, which I love.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think the cool thing about Leo is that it meets families where they are. It's not
Hmm.
trying to talk down to you. It's not trying to like be hipper than you. It's really just kind of meeting you right where you are, which is obviously families love each other. They go through all kinds of things. There are problems, but there's still a lot of humor. And I think kids talk the way they talk, and parents have the issues that they have. And I think to flatten that out is, not effective.
I love that you said that, it meets families where they are. I mean, it's so true. When you wrote that movie or anything that you write, do you have the end in mind? Do you set your intention for how you want people to feel at the end? Or does it just come from a creative place of a story that you want to tell?
It's interesting. It differs from film to film. I think sometimes I discover it through the process of outlining, which is really just setting up, discovering a character whose life I want to explore, whose world I want to explore, then setting them on a course, presenting them with obstacles, seeing what they would do and what choices they would make in the face of those obstacles, and then kind of understanding the shape of a story. And then often I'll get excited about like where it could go, how it could
Hmm.
resolve itself. Sometimes I feel too clever doing that, and I mean, there's something I'm writing now where I'm like, oh, I can see where it should end in terms of where people would want it to end. I can see the satisfying ending, but it's too easy. That's not what I want to do, and we'll see. We'll just see where it goes. The cobbler, we had an ending. It became this exercise in, okay, how do we earn that ending? You know,
So cool. Okay.
yeah. Sandy Wexler, I had no idea.
Okay. All
There's
right.
no
So
way I thought that they were going to get married, and have like, beautiful kids together. I mean,
Mhm.
I had no clue that that was going to happen. Mazel
so
tov to them.
So I guess it sounds like it varies. It depends on
Yeah,
the
yeah, it
piece.
varies. I mean, it's really all about the character. I think if you've built a character with an objective, you have them facing all kinds of challenges. They start to tell you what they need. They start to tell you what they want, and then it's your job to see, okay, well, what's available now. I know what they need. I know where they want to go, but what's available in terms of what I could present them with to ultimately find their way and to grow. You know. Now,
Hmm.
if you discover they're not growing, then most likely it's me. Then I have to kind of look a little deeper and figure out, well, what about my own personal self am I not applying here? You know?
Mm. Yeah. Okay. That's so interesting. So you really have worked with some of the biggest names in the industry.
Mm,
You made it. That's
I
awesome.
made it.
It's
I'm
hard to
good.
do,
Yeah,
and impressive. And so I guess I would love to know from you, maybe can you give people a little peek behind the curtain on
sure.
how it works? Because you're starting to see conscious ideas pulled through in movies, they get out there more and more. One of my favorites um is oh my god, I'm blanking on the name. Interstellar. Okay, Interstellar.
Yeah,
One of
it's a
my
great
favorites
one.
is Interstellar.
Totally.
So do you feel like the approach is we want to make something, go ahead and write it? Or do you want to bring something to the world so that they can see something that maybe hasn't been brought before?
Hmm.
How does it work in the industry?
Well, so often I'm like the only person in the room that wants to make the movie. I mean,
Hmm.
that's so
Really?
common. Yeah, where you have an idea, you get a chance to pitch, or somebody brings you an idea and you have a take on it. Um, and percentage wise, it's very often that like myself or if I'm working with another person, which I often do, we have a take, we have an idea, we have something we want to say, and you're usually met with a lot of no and a lot of fear and a
Mm.
lot of like how we want to do things the way they've been done before. We want to do things the way it's been proven that they'll be successful.
Yes.
They are afraid often of imagination, so that's something that I experience a lot. But lately, more and more, I've been very lucky to work with people who are getting the material. I'm working on something right now with Dana Fox, who wrote the screenplay for and produced the movie Wicked. I work with another writer named Nora Kirkpatrick, who is phenomenal. I'm working with Tom McCarthy right now again, who directed Spotlight and The Cobbler. So those are people who want the same things I want, right? Which is to tell a great story, make people laugh and cry, open stuff up, see where it goes, be at your most creative. Like you were saying about Interstellar and about, intended awareness around storytelling. I mean, I don't want to make a horror movie about nihilism. You know what I mean? Like that's not my thing. But myself and a woman I write with, Nora Kirkpatrick, she brought to us a sort of horror kind of concept movie that then we found a very conscious approach to, something that was actually kind of romantic and spiritual. And that's kind of how we approach things, is how can we bring this sort of conscious voice that we try to build into everything? How can we pull that to the forefront? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to hear you did that. I'm not a horror movie person.
Me
Uh,
neither. I really
yeah,
don't like them, but it was kind of
no,
like we had this take where we sort of said, okay, there's actually a way in here to do what we do. Uh,
I love that.
you know, but again, then you sort of end up with a room with people who are like, okay, but like how violent is it going to be? And we're kind of like,
Yeah, you're like,
that's not
huh?
really our
Not
thing,
violent. Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, not my
That's
deal.
like, so that's interesting. So have you ever had to write on something that you were like, I can't do it?
Yeah, I mean, I've written on things where it's just not been my purview, but those you tend to get kicked off those things. You know what I mean?
Oh,
You
okay.
tend to your career, I think, if you're at least in my experience, tends to kind of have a life of its own because you can try to get in certain doors, but if they're the wrong doors, ultimately you're going to leave because I'm not going to be the best horror writer and I'm not going to be the best high big budget action movie writer. I mean, there are things. that I do well, that ultimately that's where I get kind of uh, attracted or pulled toward,
Yeah.
and those are human stories. But again, like, a movie like Die Hard is a human story, and I think that's why a movie like that really works. A movie like Star Wars is a human story. Um, these are movies about people with people problems that are also adventures. And, I love Westerns. I think Westerns are amazing. I love crime movies. It's not like I spend my life writing tiny little movies about, people in cobbler shops. In fact, even the cobbler widens out into this kind of, crazy adventure. So I feel like you can find the humanity in everything, but you have to be in the right room.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. You also teach,
Hmm.
and you and I have actually done a workshop together, which I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for. And what you did for me in that workshop was you helped me realize that I do have a story to tell. And sometimes I think people, and when I say people, I mean, like I'm talking about myself, I'm like, I'm not that interesting,
You're very interesting.
and
You
you
also
can,
know you're interesting because you're curious. You
yeah,
have a podcast, so you're clearly curious. So uh, that in itself is interesting. That you are interested makes you interesting.
ah, yes. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And you pump me up, and you are such a great teacher. And I would love to help people who feel like what I felt like, which is that I don't have a story to tell, or I don't have anything that people are going to want to know about, which I realize is not true
Hmm.
now, especially. But can you help us understand why it's important to tell our own stories and how we can get it out of us in a way that is meaningful to others?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important both for the storyteller and for the audience. I think that for the storyteller, if you want to achieve consciousness, if you want to achieve real awareness, then you want to kind of respect your journey. You want to find a way to truly hold yourself in the light and be able to look at yourself and feel warmth and feel safe and loved and all the things that I think every one of us deserves. In order to get there, I think we have to truly understand, where we've been, who we are, and what we have to say. And I think if you're a writer, it's very important to figure out how that is achieved. But if you're not a writer, I think you also could really benefit from understanding your own story and how to communicate it, then seeing it reflected back to you. So not only are you able to engender empathy with others, but then you're able to see them look at you with understanding, which I then think kind of breeds community, which
Yes.
is essential.
Yeah. And connection. And I mean, maybe not everybody wants that, but I certainly do. I have,
Yeah, and I think I think most people do. I just think that some people are afraid, and I think that part of what I try to do in my workshops is to immediately mitigate that fear and say, you're not alone, right? We're doing this together.
mm,
So, people often see writing or podcasting, even if you work in like the social media space, people often see that as a lonely endeavor, that you're like by yourself at a desk, headphones in, and that's the job while the rest of the world is out your window. And in fact, we it doesn't operate like that. Like myself as a professional writer, I am always collaborating. I am always bringing people into my work. I'm always workshopping things with other writers, I have a community. So I try to bring that into people's experience and say, look, you've got a secret society of people that are going to do this with you. It's a fellowship, you know. So I think that gets people sort of relaxed right away. Uh, and it's fun to work with your fear. It's fun to walk through the fire a little bit, you know. There's joy in that, you know.
Mhm.
Sitting on the couch or sitting in the chair and being blocked or uh, paralyzed is just not it's not a groovy feeling.
No, there's no payoff in that, but the
There's no
payoff to get
payoff.
through your fear,
Yeah.
let me tell you, I can tell you firsthand, there's a lot of payoff there.
Yeah. That's where the fun is, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You said so many beautiful things. I love that the thing that you said about holding yourself into the light. I could cry listening to just those
Mm,
words. There's something about those words that is so, so special. And I think it's you. I mean, I think what you bring to the table in these workshops and just the your energy, the way you are, it's really endearing. And
thank you.
I cherish you so much.
Mm,
So I'm so so grateful that you're here and you're doing this. And if anybody is interested in learning from you and hearing how to tell your own stories, you know, to reap the rewards and benefits that we were just talking about, like you offer classes and people
yeah.
can sign up for this. Like there
Yeah.
is opportunities for you.
Yeah, I really learned that I love teaching and I love working with writers. I taught at Tisch. I taught screenwriting at Tisch, which was a great experience. I'm able now to teach these workshops where we do them on Zoom. We do a rolling admissions process, so you can just jump in at any time. And it's all different kinds of writers. Some people aren't even writing; they're just kind of going on their own personal journey around storytelling. Trying to sort of decipher who they are, you know, which really helps the writers because we're all a protagonist in our own life, you know, so it's narrative is narrative and we're all inside one, you know, life is a movie. Stakes are sometimes high, sometimes there are big laughs, big cries. In my case, ugly cries. I
Mine
do
too.
that, yeah. But uh but yeah, so you know, it's we're up and running and we have a lot of fun. And also this time around, every session I bring in either a professional writer, filmmaker, director, executive, or producer for about a half hour to come in and field questions. And we do table reads of people's material in front of professionals. It's kind of a great way to also network and meet folks who are doing what you want to do, you know, and they're doing it for
Hmm.
a living. Yeah, it's called the Paul Sado Story Workshop. And if you're interested, you can hit me on Instagram at the Paul Sado. You can just DM me there, or you can email me at no, you can email me at the Paul Sado Workshop at gmail.com. I'm still just getting used to all this. It's only been, you know, 40 years, but the internet is finally taking hold. Yeah, finally starting to get it.
So it's finally picking up.
Yeah,
That old internet.
you know,
Yeah, well, we'll definitely put all the links below.
yeah,
But I highly encourage everybody to, if you're interested, even if you're a writer for sure, but if not, you just want to learn how to tell your story. I mean, really, like it's just such a warm, like loving environment like that Paul creates. So I highly encourage it, especially if you want to build community, like you said.
it's all about
Re-
community. Yeah, and people leave these workshops and they have new friends and they have new collaborators, and you know, it doesn't just stay. You know, within the sessions, it's just you know you start to build out your life as a writer and a storyteller. So it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, who knows? Maybe even you'll see me in one of those classes.
Yeah, that
I
would be
want to take
great to have
another
you
one
back in
again
there. That would be
soon.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have so much fun.
Um, Do you have any quick tips, like little sneak peeks? I'm just thinking about that and trick
Hmm.
you had told me.
Yeah.
Can you share that little trick for everybody? Do you mind?
No, of course. Yeah, I think that and we do this sort of as kind of an introduction to the workshop. I think that the biggest problem that writers have, or just in general storytellers have, is that we try to stack scenes, we try to stack information, we don't motivate things. So, in other words, in real life, events lead to other events, they lead to other events based on the choices that we make. When we're trying to plot a story, we're just trying to hit certain points that we think are exciting or are good ideas. Whereas if we're building a story through character motivation, there's so much more available to us, so many ideas we wouldn't have thought about. So I think the enemy of uh, story is the word and. So when we say, if I say to you, Kristen invited me on on her podcast, and I went and did her podcast, and then I was done. That's what the word "and" gets us. But if you're
Mhm.
using words like "but," "until," "meanwhile," "so," "then," "but then," "so now," "until now," "because," these are all motivational words. So if I'm telling that same story, but I'm not using the word "and," I'm saying, Kristen invited me to do her podcast. So I asked her what I needed to do in order to be prepared. So she told me, here's some questions. But I became very intimidated by the questions. So I picked up the paper to look at it very carefully until a gust of wind came, which blew the paper out of my hands. So I had to chase the paper. But I remembered a friend of mine had always said, there's nothing sadder than a man chasing a piece of paper on the street. So I stopped. But when I stopped, I realized I was in the middle of the street because I hadn't noticed that I was running into traffic when I was chasing the papers. So I immediately was hit by a bus because of my earlier decisions. So now I'm laying on the floor. The bus driver is freaking out. In other words, just from this little piece of
Yeah.
information, I can now spin out an entire story because everything is motivated. So that's what I mean by available. There's so many beats between the original idea uh, and you know if you don't explore those beats, it's like if you look at a ruler, there's the inches, then there's the
Mhm.
centimeters. The centimeters, that's where the story is.
Mm.
The inches are what we believe is our genius plot, which I promise you will always change. It's like life. You could fill your calendar with all kinds of things, but between those events, so much is happening. I have to take my
Mhm.
son to school. Okay, sure takes a lot of shit to get him to school, doesn't it? So the
Yeah.
story isn't that I took him to school. The story is what it took to get him there. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true, and that's true. That makes me think about all the
Yeah, I'm
stuff I
thinking
did.
about you in that case. I don't have kids.
Thank you. Um, and just for the record, like the paper did not blow out of your hand, and you not
No,
to not. If I,
that's storytelling.
that's so good,
Yeah,
so
it
good.
that little trick allows me to kind of go to start with something, then to just experiment, see how far I could pull it out.
Mm.
I was not in fact hit by a bus.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes, we would not want that. Before I get into my final questions,
Hmm.
which I ask all my guests, I would love to know, is there anything that you do to prepare yourself for either writing a movie or teaching a class? Do you meditate? Do you have any spiritual practices that you've embodied that really have helped you along the way that you would recommend for anybody?
Yeah, I always meditate. I try to do it in the morning and in the evening. I just think it's, I live in New York, and there's so much just kind of cosmic freneticism out there that I really need to just sort of check in to the nothing and recharge. I also, like, whether you believe in God or the universe or the muse, I like to say in class, I talk about the muse a lot. I will always sort of pray to the muse before I do anything. I did it before this podcast. I said, please allow me to say something that is of value, allow me to be of service, help me to be a conscious guest. Um,
Hmm.
all the things that I intend to create during this, experience with you. These are things I can just ask for. And I can ask the muses too, hey, join me in this interview, join me in this document, join me in this class. It's a co-creation. Let's do it together, as opposed to I'm this ego guy and I'm just gonna wrestle the ideas off of the page and I know what the fuck I'm doing. Because believe me, I tried it that way a long time ago and it did not
Not
work.
work.
You know.
My gosh. Well, thank you for doing that. You are a very conscious guest.
Oh, thank you so much for bringing me in here and allowing me to say that prayer.
Well, before you leave, I have some
Mm-hmm.
questions that I ask everybody.
Cool.
The first is reflecting on our conversation today. What's one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember about consciousness and the work that you do?
I think it's important to remember that writing in any capacity is an honorable and noble profession, that you are engendering empathy by doing it, that by being aware, by being conscious, by being intentional, you are saving the world, essentially. You are creating an energy that raises the frequency to a place where I think we can all live a little better. So I think that's key.
Beautiful. So good. So, so good. All right. If someone's just starting their journey towards a deeper understanding of consciousness,
Hmm.
what advice would you offer them?
I think jump in, first of all, that I think, for lack of a better word, like nirvana is not a hustle and grind state. It's not about, you're not going to claw your way to conscious contact with the greater universe. You've got to let go, which is just because we're in human bodies, very difficult often. Everything I've ever let go of has claw marks on it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a perfect example of this, but the letting go is, I think, really, especially look, you're a writer, you're looking at the blank page, you're going to decide, you know, oh, I have to make a perfect. No, you don't have to do anything. Just make a mess, jump in, see what happens.
That's so funny. It's so good. I can relate to that. Everything I've ever let go has claw marks in it. Oh my
Yeah.
God, it's so good. Anyway, that was funny and also really relatable. All right, last question. In your opinion, what does it mean to you to live life consciously?
It's a really good question. I think, and something I've learned in recovery is that all we have is the day. So to really be present in the day, to be present in the day, to be aware of the people around you, to be aware of your own mindset, and to find a gratitude practice that works for you so that every day, as much as possible, be, um, we can feel like it's a gift and a blessing that we even get to do any of this.
That was very well said. Thank you for that. Thank you so
Sure.
much for that. Paul, this has been an incredible conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing. One of my
Yeah,
favorites.
I feel the same way. It's so
Oh,
always so great to talk to you.
oh, thank you. Well, the honor's mine to have you here. I really, really appreciate your time. Your insights on storytelling, intention, creativity, they really truly deepened our understanding of how we can shape our own story through a conscious lens. So thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. And if anyone's interested in seeing more of Paul's work, be sure to check out Leo on Netflix for sure. Sandy Wexler and his other films. Take his class if you have any thought on being a writer or wanting to tell his story. It is a perfect way to bring it out of you. I,
Yeah, take the
you know,
class and we'd love to
yeah,
have you back too.
I would love to come
Your
back.
value added,
Thank you. I would
of
love to come back.
course.
Maybe you'll see me there. And thank you all to the listeners for tuning in to another episode. And if this resonated with you, please connect with us to share your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. In the meantime, stay curious, stay conscious, and keep telling your story. Bye for now.